So we're in control flows, and really we're just before the section of functions, and I'm going to say it's the end of control flows in a way. Functions are the last thing in control flows. But just before we get into functions, because functions are a massive part of all coding for all languages, it's kind of like a key building block. Any repeated code goes into a function, and also we get these ideas of isolation, like encapsulation and so forth, where variables are protected from other parts of the code. So functions are immense. But just before we get to that, we went kind of like through our journey. But you see that we've gained an amazing amount of power in going through the journey, and we haven't done that much in terms of the real basics. So like removing all of the other components, there were four native data types. So just four types over here. Four types. That's all it was. And we had an integer. An integer is really simple. It was just a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth. Strings, again, very common. We need them. And it's just like names in quotation marks. I put the double quotes. So just things like that, Darren and hello world. Just things like that, and single characters and so forth. Then floats, again, no harder. Something like that. There's pi as a float, or 2.71, the natural number, or any other number, 1.5, or 1000.1. So we had all of those things again, floats, and finally booleans, which the reality is booleans are integers even in some languages. I mean, SQL in SQLite it's classified as an integer, but it's a true, which could be a 0 and a false. Also, true is a 1, mistake, and 0 is a false. So false is a 0. And that's basically it. That was pretty much our four native data types covered. And we will go into more types at a later time. But that was sufficient to get you through a hell of a lot of Python code. Then we went into our lists, and we saw that a list was just, in square brackets, and it was just a bunch of things that we could have put in there. We could have put numbers into the list. We could have put strings into the list. And we could have put any of our other native data types or any other type into the list as well. So ... We could have even put dictionaries into lists and lists into lists. So we could have put a dictionary into a list, and we could have put a list into a list, and we could have nested those. So an amazing amount of power again. Then we saw the tuple. The tuple was like a list, but we couldn't change the values inside it. But we could have the same type of thing, and there was similarities. There were similarities and difference to the lists. Then we saw a different type of collection, which was a set. But again, we could put loads of things into a set, so long as they were unique. So here in the tuple, for example, and also in the list, we could have put in repeated values, but in the set we can't put repeated values. So that was pretty much unique. There we go, unique. So that was pretty much it. That covered most of it. And then we saw a final data type, which was a dictionary, which was effectively like a set of tuples, which is or a whole series of key value pairs. So key value pairs like this. So we'd have key value, and then we'd have a second key value. And again, outside of that, that's pretty much it. So we'd have key 1, value 1, and key 2, and value 2, and so forth. And outside of that, there's not much else that we needed to do. So we've only had 4 things here and 4 types over here, or 4 collections. So we had 4 native data types and 4 collection types, and that was basically it. It took us a tremendous way in Python. And then we moved on to the control flow, and we see that if I count down here, I think there's 7 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 of them, but in reality, there's only about 3 or 4 of them that are used. If 4 in range, they're very common. The break and continues, well, they're partly used somehow. They're sort of like halves. You might use a break, you might use a continue somewhere. The else statement is used quite a lot. So if for range and else is used a lot. The pass statement is used a lot, but it doesn't do anything. It literally does nothing by definition. And the match statement, well, that only came in versions 3.10 and above. So everyone was able to live without it anyway. So there was only half a dozen at most of these statements. So six statements or methods slash methods that we needed to know, and that took us all the way to the point of getting to functions. And there's only really two parts left, which one is functions, and the next one, which lies outside of control flow but actually probably should be in, but it's classes. And that's basically it. We've got all the way. We can do nearly everything that we want in Python up to the point of functions and classes, and functions is going to be our next section in the control flow. These two last bits are immensely powerful, functions and classes. And actually, kind of like in particular classes towards the end, because classes, everything in Python is an object, and we're going to see that everything ultimately is an object. So you know, everything is in the form of class. Even like the integers and the strings and floats that we saw before, they were all actually classes. And classes contain functions. Functions in classes happen to be called methods. That's all. So there's a very strong interlocking with all of this stuff. And we're on functions, and then after functions and classes, we will be getting on to actually doing some really interesting things, and we haven't had to do that much. So Python is really, really simple. We're just before functions, and we can already do a tremendous amount. And outside of functions, when we've done functions, we're going to start doing some I'll call it proper coding.